Good evening, everyone. Just a few announcements. Any member or officer in physical attendance with an electronic device should mute it to avoid feedback. Any remote participant, please keep your camera and microphone off unless you wish to speak, and ideally do not use the camera facilities at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. The meeting may be recorded and data collected during recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council websites. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swale Borough Council or Kent County Council laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or any mobile or tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you and you may not be recorded as being in attendance. Welcome members, officers and any members of the public to this licensing committee meeting, including any visiting members, any members and members of the public. The following staff are in attendance. Confidential Lawyer, Mid-Kent Legal, Helen Ward, Community Service Manager, Steph Curtis, Licence Team Leader, Chris Hills, Licence Officer Joe Thompson and Democratic Services Kelly McKenzie. Are members all aware of the emergency evacuation procedure? There are no planned evacuations. If the alarm sounds, Democratic Service Officer will direct you all the attendees safely out of the building and into the car park. The lifts must not be used. Is there anyone in attendance with mobility issues? Please indicate now. No, you all look a healthy lot. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Leanne Moore, Councillor Carol Jackson, and her substitute is Councillor Karen Watson. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, item 3, minutes. Do members take the following minutes as a correct recording? The minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of October 2023, minutes number 373379. All agreed? Thank you, I will sign those. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Right, item 5, Swale Borough Council Street Trading Policy 2024 to 2026. I invite the officer to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform members of the result of a public consultation in respect of a draft street trading policy. A council can choose to adopt provisions contained within the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982, which relate to street trading, and can require that streets within its borough are designated as consent streets, where any trading, subject to legal exemptions, can only take place once a street trading consent has been obtained from the council. Swale adopted the provisions of the Act in July 2010, and whilst there is no statutory requirement to have a policy associated with the administration of the legislation, Swale did choose to adopt a policy to set out how we would apply the provisions of the Act in 2013, and this has been subject to various renewals since that date. The latest version of the policy was adopted in March 2021, when substantial changes to the previous policy were made, and this was subject to some further amendments which were adopted in April 2023. The current policy is due to expire on the 31st of March 2024, so whilst the policy has come under the scrutiny of this committee several times during its current 3-year life, we have needed to ensure that it can be renewed in a timely fashion, hence it coming before members yet again. It is fair to say that we now have a policy that works well for all traders, whether they have 6-month or yearly consents, or whether they have one-off consents to trade at the various events held within the borough during the year. Hence, there are no proposed changes other than the minor ones that are mentioned at paragraph 3.1 of the report. There was a wide-ranging consultation over an 8-week period, which ran between the 1st of November 2023 to the 29th of December. Only one response was received, which was attached as Appendix 2. In the light of the comment made, it is proposed to include an amendment to the policy as shown if members agree. If members choose to approve the draft street trading policy, it will then need to be presented to the Policy and Resources Committee in March for formal ratification, which is in line with current constitution requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I open up the debate for members to ask any questions. Councillor Mike Whiting.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman, and thank you, Chris. I mean, it's not really a question, it's just a comment to say that I think this was comprehensively amended a couple of years back for the good, I must say, thanks to the work of the officers. And I think there's the minor amendments that were being proposed tonight. I'd certainly be happy to support them. I think the policy is a good one. It does encourage traders to the borough, I believe, and ensure that that street trading continues, but continues in a safe and proper way. So I certainly support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Councillor Mark Last.
Thank you, Chair. I found it quite an interesting report. It's the first time I've sort of been on licensing and looked through this. But what I was interested to know, and it's not directly related to the report, is sort of how many businesses we've got signed up to the contracts for 6 and 12 months. So the impact of that.
I can tell you because we have an annual report coming up which actually has the stats. So isn't that lucky? Otherwise I wouldn't be able to. So if we have a look, we had, where is it? Bear with. Can you find, oh, must be here somewhere. My apologies, I thought that there we go. Annual or 6-month street trading consents, 21. And the one-off for events, 116.
Is there a split between the 6 and 12 months?
It tends to be, the ice cream traders tend to go for 6 months because obviously they don't tend to serve ice cream during the winter. So those that have got burger vans, chip vans, what have you, they'll have a yearly one. Some of the street traders for ice cream do have a yearly one, but it's up to them to decide what they're going to do and how they run their business, really.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you. There are 2 recommendations. Do I have a proposer to agree recommendations 1 and 2? Councillor Winkless and a seconder? Councillor Tom Nunny. All those in favour, please raise their hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 6, Scrap Metal Dealers Licence Policy 2004 to 2027. I invite the officer to introduce the report.
Hello. This report is to present members with a draft revision of the current Swale Borough Council scrap metal policy and to invite comments on it prior to it being put out to consultation and formally adopted. There's no legal requirement for a local authority to have a policy for scrap metal dealers, but it helps to reassure both applicants and public alike as to the approach that Swale will take to both the licensing and enforcement of scrap metal dealers and scrap metal sites. Additionally, there is already much good work that is being undertaken by the Environmental Response Team regarding waste metal, and licensing team wish to work closely with them to ensure compliance with the Act. Having adopted the policy assists with this aim. A scrap metal dealers policy was first adopted by Swale in July 2018 with the commitment that it would be reviewed at 3 yearly intervals. There have been no changes to the legislation and therefore the draft policy remains unchanged from the previously adopted. The policy takes into account the provisions of the Scrap Metal Dealers Act 2013, which gave local authorities the power to refuse and grant a licence and the powers to revoke a licence if deemed necessary. There are two different types of licences that can be issued: a site licence and a mobile collector's licence. Site licences are self-explanatory and are to license sites to receive scrap metal and to collect it from elsewhere and bring it to the site. Mobile collectors are people who travel around the streets and collect scrap metal from domestic dwellings. Mobile collectors must obtain a licence from every local authority in whose area they collect, so it can be quite an expensive thing for them. All applicants are required to obtain a DBS check to prove they are fit and proper. And then under the Finance Act 2021, which came into force in April 22, applicants must provide a tax check code to show they are registered with HMRC. First-time applicants not yet registered must confirm their awareness of their tax obligations. For both scrap metal sites and collectors, all payments must be made by either cheque or electronic transfer. No cash is allowed to change hands. All licences are recorded not only locally but on a central register maintained by the Environment Agency. Unfortunately, one thing that was missed when the legislation was drafted, probably because it was rushed through by Parliament in a few months, is the ability to refuse a licence because there is no planning permission for the site. This policy reflects what is laid out in the legislation and is intended to ensure that councils act in the manner that is consistent with both the Act and best practice. The policy consultation will begin on the 4th of March and run for 6 weeks until the 26th of April. Incoming responses will be recorded on a grid and evaluated by the Community Services Manager together with licensing officers. If as a result the policy needs amendments, the grid and recommendations will be put before the licensing committee for consideration and inclusion prior to the approval and a formal adoption by the Policy and Resources Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I open up the meeting for any comments or questions. Councillor Mark Last.
My only question really revolves around how do we enforce this policy? There doesn't seem to be anything written in this how it will be enforced.
Councils generally, the enforcement is dealt with by environmental protection. So it's the environmental response team who have powers under environmental legislation that we previously didn't have under the old Scrap Metal Act from 1964. So really, our side of it is the site licences, which generally tend to be well managed, and when we issue a licence, we can either refuse or revoke, and those are the type of things that would come to committee. But in terms of the mobile collectors, it would be the environmental response team who tend to go out once a month with the police, and that they do sort of spot checks and make sure that the collectors have a licence. We would be involved if they found somebody that they thought wasn't licensed. They would ask us, and then we could give them a statement, and they would be the ones that would take a prosecution because they are well practiced in that. It can be quite difficult to prove whether someone is licensed because obviously they could be coming from another local authority area, and it's quite hard to prove where the metal came from, if you like. Sorry, does that answer your question? Yeah, that does.
Any more questions? Councillor Tom Nundy.
Thank you, Chair. On the section 5, the application process, it says that the application form will be available from the licensing department, and that a basic disclosure and barring, a basic DBS check, but there's no sort of, in the policy, there's nothing really sort of says what might stop someone from getting a licence in terms of their offence. And I realise that it would be on a case-by-case basis potentially, and that on balance, someone that committed a crime 20 years ago, is probably in a different mindset to someone that committed a crime 6 months ago. But is there any sort of further guidance about types of offences that wouldn't be allowed, if that makes sense?
It's actually Appendix A, Councillor. So page 56 and 57 of the page 16 and 17 of the policy, those are all the relevant offences. So those are the ones that we could actually refuse a licence on. And obviously, if it was 15, 20 years ago, because this is only a basic DBS, it wouldn't actually show up anyway. So as far as that's concerned, they would be clear. So.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions?
I was going to, Chair. Thank you. A bit of clarification, and I've just lost the page. In respect of, on page 46, Chair, it talks about revoking, but under 4.8 there's a whole load of there's 6 or 7 conditions, but under 4.9 there's only the 3. Could those in the paragraph above in 4.8 not apply? And if they can't, I presume it's something to do with the Act rather than a choice that we're making.
To be perfectly honest, Councillor, yes, Councillor, this policy is quite simply a lift of the Act. It's not something that we went off piste on and did. To be perfectly honest with you, if we ever did have anything like this, I would be looking to the trusty lady on the right of me, the most wonderful lawyer that ever existed, as far as I'm concerned, and she would steer me straight. So.
Thank you, Chris. One introduction. Looking at the 4.8 and 4.9, there is a difference in the sense that 4.9 talks about a presumption to refuse, which is a little stronger than in 4.8. Which talks about particular relevance. So where there have been the matters mentioned in 4.9, that would be a stronger presumption to reviews than something would have more discretion of just particular relevance, would be why those two are distinguished there.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions? Hello, Councillor Rich Lehman.
Hello, Chairman. I am going to keep up my habit of making picky little typo comments, and there's one that I've noticed since this item started. On page 40, and this is really, pedantic, but I think it probably does need some amendment. We've got, at the top of column 1, it says section number and then content, and the section number should either say page number or the section numbers should be whatever the word I'm trying to think of is, sequential. Whereas at the moment they're relating to the page number rather than the section number.
Yeah. Gotcha.
That's one thing. And then the other thing, the introduction, paragraph 1, and I have read more than paragraph 1.1 just because I'm talking about paragraph 1.1, is the same introduction from 2018, and I wonder if that needs any updating. It could be that all of the thefts mentioned here have still happened in the last 5 years, but could that be tweaked before it goes to consultation? Thank you.
As far as I'm aware, I think that not a lot has happened since 2018. Certainly in the days when I used to commute, there wasn't a week went past when your train wasn't delayed because some dear little darling was on the track somewhere trying to steal the cables. And I think there probably isn't the proliferation of lifting up drains or possibly so much stealing lead off church roofs. But I suppose once you've stolen it once, they're not going to replace it with lead. So I don't really think there's been an awful lot of change with this. Personally, if you have to ask me, I think this is a ridiculous act. It was rushed through as a private member's bill back in 2013 without much thought. And it was really to establish a finance trail rather than anything else. But even that can be quite sort of ridiculous, really, because I have been to scrap sites, not in this borough, but elsewhere, where you go in one office, you sell your scrap, they give you a cheque, so you've got your paper trail, but they've got a cheque cashing office next door. So really, you know, it's a bit cynical, quite frankly, and I don't think we've been given much teeth, which is why really we still rely very much on the environmental response team, because they are the chaps that are going out and they are checking not only on whether somebody's got a scrap metal dealer's licence, but whether they've got a waste carrier's licence. And so that's where, you know, so that team is really fabulous. And I think there could be an argument to be said that the licensing should have gone to them, but because when the Act came in there was this power to revoke or to include a couple of standard extra conditions, you had to have a committee to take it to. So that's why it came licensing's way, which came as a great shock to a lot of licensing officers at the time.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. So following up on that, is it worth maybe contracting that paragraph 1.1 a little to take those things out? Do we need to formally amend that, or?
Trustee Joe will do that for you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Anyone? Right. Could I have a proposer to agree recommendation 1 and 2? Councillor Rich Lehman. Councillor Winkler, seconder. All those in favour, please raise their hand. Unanimous again. Thank you. Right, item 7, review of the statement of licensing policy for sex establishments and sexual entertainment venues. I invite the officers to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So another policy for you. So this one is to present you with the draft sex establishment policy and to invite comments on it prior to it being put out to consultation and then formally adopted. The power to regulate sex establishments was first contained within the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982, and Swale formally adopted the provisions in January 1983. The Policing and Crime Act of 2009 introduced a new category of sex establishment called sexual entertainment venues, which was intended to regulate lap dancing clubs and the like, and adult entertainment in public houses. It's not a mandatory requirement to adopt the provisions of the 2009 Act, but Swale decided to do so, and they became effective as of the 1st of December 2010. As part of this, Swale developed a sex establishment policy, which was approved by General Licensing Committee in November 2010, and the policy has been reviewed at regular intervals since then, with the latest policy being adopted on the 1st of October 2021. The existing policy has now been reviewed by officers, but as there have been no changes to existing legislation, it remains the same, and the draft policy is shown at page 65 of the agenda. Again, as Joe has said with the other policy, as well as giving guidance to applicants for licences, the policy also details the grounds which the licensing authority will take into account when considering applications. And whilst these are quite far-reaching, interestingly, an objection cannot be made on purely moral or religious grounds. A local authority can set a numerical limits on sex establishments within any set area, but it is proposed that a limit is not set and that each application is decided on its own merits. Currently, there are no sex establishments within the borough. Members should also note that a licensed premises can operate sex entertainments once a month and no more than 11 times per year without the requirement for obtaining a licence. This proposed consultation will run between the 4th of March and the 26th of April. And again, the standard is that we enter the responses onto a grid, we evaluate them with Steph, the Community Services Manager, and then we decide whether the policy needs amendment. So the recommendations will then be put to a future meeting of this committee for consideration and inclusion of any amendments, and prior to a request for formal approval and adoption by the Policy and Resources Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I open up for debate. Any questions? Councillor Tom Numday.
Hi, Thank you. Just what you said a minute ago about a licensed premises can operate. By licensed premises, do you mean like a pub or a nightclub? Yeah. Okay. The other question I've got is at 14.1, it says that the licence would last for a year. Yeah. Well, up to 1 year. Is there a reason that it's, because that's quite a short, is there a reason why that's such a short time?
I believe it's in the legislation.
It's in the legislation. It has come back again for a renewal every year.
All right, that's fine. I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Councillor Whiting?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. You know, the policy hasn't changed, so we're being asked to approve something that is already there. I understand that it's going to go to consultation. I just wonder whether we could, I might be able to suggest or recommend or propose that, in fact, that we just delegate the consultation to the officers as is, and if there are no major changes as a result of that consultation, that we simply allow it go straight to P&R. There's little reason for it to come back here and take up members' time, and just delegate that to the officers to write the report to P&R with a recommendation to proceed. If there were no, as I on the proviso, of course, there are no major changes required by the police or some of the other statutory bodies. Thank you.
Would you like to propose? Seconder? All those in favour?
Saves you a bit of work.
Yeah.
It certainly does.
Thank you very much. Saves us all a bit of time, doesn't it? There are two recommendations. Do I have a proposal to agree to recommendations 1 and 2? Councillor Mark Last, seconder. Councillor Tom Lundy. Right. All those in favour? Agreed unanimously. Thank you. All right. Right, item 8. Report on the work of the licensing team. I invite the officer to introduce the report.
Thank you. So this is a strange one. This has not appeared before the committee before. So the licensing team, we were subject to an audit of the licensing function, and it was pleasing to be told that we'd achieved a determination that our processes were sound. There were 3 recommendations that did come out of that audit for us to implement. One was to revisit the risk rating of the licensed premises and then conduct more proactive licensing inspections based on that risk rating. The second was to work with the comms team to make the licensing pages of the Swale website more user-friendly and to include more information. And finally, to present an annual report to Licensing Committee, which was for performance monitoring purposes, and hence the reason that you've got this report before you, and which is our intention that from going forward you'll get on an annual basis. As you can see, the report gives a brief outline of the responsibilities and the activities of the team during 2023, as well as proposed work during the coming year. And we've given you some statistics. As this is a first report, it would be of a great assistance to the team if members could give advice and information as to what they would like to see in future reports, so that we're actually hitting the spot as to what you want to know about what we get up to on a daily basis. Thank you.
I found this very useful, you know, to actually have something down you could read about it. Any questions? No? Councillor Rich Lehman.
Just one question. Paragraph 2.9 makes mention of the fact that the team was understaffed and that a new team member has now been trained. Does that mean that the team currently is at full strength? Yes.
Absolutely. We were very lucky. We've got a good member that's come on board. So we will be able to go out there and do more proactive inspections. I would say, you know, we worked really on intelligence-led inspections or whether we thought that there was an issue. For example, in Queenborough in 2022, there seemed to be a few complaints, well, quite a lot of complaints coming in. So in 2023, we made sure that we got out very early in the summer, visited all the premises, gave them the gypsy's curse about what we wanted them to behave and whatever. And as a result of that, the only complaint we got was a noise complaint which ended up with a statutory noise abatement notice being served. So that was very good. We also did one particular inspection which was on a premises which, curiously, licensing had never had any complaints about. But Trading Standards had many complaints about the sale of underage alcohol, but more particularly underage vapes. And we went in, we served a closure notice because we found they didn't have an active DPS on the premises. So, well, that's it, you're shut. And as a result of that, the police served a review. Trading Standards then let slip during their very good representation that 7% of all the complaints received by Trading Standards for the whole county related to this premises. And the solicitor representing the licensee gave him the very, valid advice that it was best that he just surrender the licence. So that is what he did. I don't know how it's going to affect the sale of underage vapes, but from our point of view, it was a great success. And as a result of that, we've had some training from Trading Standards as to what to look out for, what's a legal vape, what isn't. So it was a really good bit of interagency work. So I wouldn't say we've not done. But what we haven't done is the proactive stuff. And as you've probably seen, what we've done is we've flipped the risk rating on the head. We will have discussed this in the licensing training with new members, that the traditional risk rating is that your later opening premises, such as your town centre pubs, are the ones that are supposed to be high risk. Well, in actual fact, they run very well. The premises you've got to be bothered about and what we will be concentrating on is the off licences. Because that is where you find the greater amount of non-compliance. And indeed, you do occasionally find illegal workers. We had a review on that last year on that very basis. So that's really, where we go with that.
I mean, my experience of growing up in Medway is that the off licences had non-compliance, but we probably shouldn't go into that too much.
I'm a Gravesend girl, you can't say anything to me.
Just following up on that, will that team being more fully up to speed now mean that there's, obviously you can't say definitely, but will it mean that there's a greater likelihood that we will get more hearings and panels during the coming year?
I would hope not. And the reason I say that is I tend to think that if I have to come to hearing over that sort of thing, I have failed. Because I should be able to go out, I should be able to read the Riot Act, get everything sorted, go back some weeks later to find that the compliance is now up to speed. If I have to come to committee, then it's a bit of a shame. I'm not saying it won't happen, but if you don't get an increase in committee meetings, don't think it's because we're not doing our job. But we could actually, we'll obviously in later reports be able to evidence how many inspections we did, how many follow-ups, who was compliant, who wasn't. So that is something that we could note that we would do for you in future reports.
Councillor Lunday? You don't. Councillor Whiting?
Just to say that was a similar point to Councillor Lehman, really. It's quite welcome. So there's extra information in future reports I think would be quite useful. I was going to make a comment on page 102 about the licensing subcommittees, both licensing and taxes. Just actually there's fewer cases there listed in 2023 than I thought there was. But I'm believing the figures, but it just seems quite a quiet year.
Actually, it was, Councillor. 2022 was the mad year. It was absolutely every premises licence we got we got objections on. We didn't know whether we were standing on our head or our bottom half the time. So yes, it does seem as though there's few. I actually went through the Swale website to make sure I hadn't missed any off, because it did seem like that we'd done more, but it was that. But you know, it's going to vary year on year.
Absolutely. And Chairman, just to, if I may, thank you for that, Chris, and just if I may, just to be a bit of a pedant like Councillor Lehman, can I just say teams are singular, and we talk about in 2.3 the team are responsible, but then we go on to say further down that the team is responsible. But a team is of one singular, and team is better than team are. That's all, and the council is as well, not the council are. That's just me being an editorial pedant. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right. I'll ask members to note the report. Noted. Thank you very much. I now close the meeting at 9:35. Thank you, everyone. Oh, it's so small.